We're not even finished with the 2023 season. We're already talking draft. Hey everybody, welcome back to another video here on the Washington Football Maniacs channel. My name is Greg, and if you're new here, this channel is dedicated to the Washington Commanders, soon to be one of the best franchises in the NFL. Thanks to the part of Josh Harris and company, the new ownership of the Washington Commanders, as they plan to completely revamp everything for the 2024 season. And as we're watching the 2023 season crash and burn, we're showing that, hey, fans now are starting to turn their attention toward the draft, and we're starting to have conversations about the draft and who would be the best to pick at number 5, because currently the Washington Commanders have the 5th overall pick. Now, we may not wind up with that. We may wind up back at 7th. We may go up to the 4th. Who knows? We still have a few games left. Now, a lot of us fans are looking at the rest of our schedule going, there's no way that we're going to be able to win any of these games. Who knows? Maybe Ron Rivera turns out to have this defense playing like the 85 Bears, and somehow the Commanders end up at 9-8, not very likely. And honestly, I think a lot of fans would, dare I say, be upset if we went on such a winning streak in terms of the draft. But that being said, we may squeak out another win, possibly. And, if that's the case, then I don't know if that really is going to upset our draft position currently, because the Bears, honestly, they're playing a little bit better. And now that Justin Fields is back in there, and I'm saying a little bit better, not necessarily playing lights out. Montez Sweat is giving them some good minutes as well. He had a sack in the game last night on Joshua Dobbs. I'll get it right in a second. Dobbs. So there you go. Washington continues to climb up into the draft choices there. So, yeah, we're talking draft, and we're not even done with the 2023 season yet. But for all intents and purposes, we know that we're out of the playoffs, and we know that things are winding down as far as this current coaching staff. Now, Ron Rivera, of course, he has earned the right to finish the season. Honestly, as much as I have called for his head, as much as a lot of other fans have called for his head, Jack Del Rio did get fired along with the defensive backs coach. I will have to say, I think, yes, he has earned the right to go ahead and finish the season. It probably, honestly, would not have done the team, the franchise, any good to have fired him in season. I know a lot of folks, including myself, had kicked around the idea of going ahead and making Eric Bieniemy the interim head coach, because it's kind of like a trial basis, right? Let's see what Eric Bieniemy can do as far as being a head coach. At the same time, we're hearing things in terms of players not really being warmed up to the idea of Eric Bieniemy being their head coach. A lot of people are getting, or a lot of players, I would say, are pushing back on the idea of Eric Bieniemy being the head coach. So there's no guarantee that Bieniemy would be retained as head coach. And that being the case, he may not even be retained as offensive coordinator. It really depends on, upon the new regime next year. That being said, there's likely going to be some sweeping changes coming in next season. Now, Obviously, what's going to happen is Josh Harris, he's going to be looking for general managers who are fans of the analytical approach, and he's going to try to see if he can get somebody who is going to be able to, look at the numbers, let the analytics help him to decide who's going to be the best in terms of draft picks, picking his next head coach, things like that. But if we look at the draft picks, a lot of fans right now, they're talking about, a lot of them are starting to turn on Sam Howell, and they're like, Sam Howell is not necessarily the best quarterback. Let's go with quarterback next year. And we all know who they're talking about. And honestly, I don't think that unless that Washington somehow winds up in the first or second spot as far as the draft picks, you're not going to get Caleb Williams. So I'm not really sure why that suddenly a lot of fans are really tied toward picking a quarterback. If you want to pick a quarterback who's going to back up Sam Howell, that's perfectly fine. You don't have to pick him in the first round. I would say that, honestly, we need to be looking at other areas. Now, another draft pick that people have looked at is wide receiver. And, of course, I felt that we were loaded at wide receiver this year, but as things have progressed, we've seen that, our wide receivers have not had the best of year. Even Terry McLaurin has not had that great of a year this year. Jahan Dotson hasn't had that great of a year this year. Diami Brown, I don't think he's going to be around next year. Curtis Samuel, I think he's gone next year. So you really start to we may have to look at the draft as far as bringing in some new guys. Maybe we are in a position of drafting somebody like Marvin Harrison Jr. Would you do that? Well, I would say that if it's going to be a reach to grab that left tackle in the first round, and Marvin Harrison is on the board, maybe you do that. But then again, how much emphasis do you really put into the best player available, stance? Because I think it goes much deeper than that. I don't think you can just go with best player available and that's it. I don't think it's just always that cut and dry. I think there's a lot more of an analytical approach to this rather than to just go with best player available or, draft for needs. I think that's the reason why that a lot of times you do see teams that tend to, trade down, move around the draft board to try to find the players that they need and to also pick up draft picks as well. And it may be that that's what the Commanders wind up having to do. Now, you can do a little bit of both. You can pick up the best player available if you wind up, your pick is there, you're on the board, I should say, you're on the clock, and your pick has gotten picked, like maybe right before your time to go on the clock. So you have to wind up picking the next best player available at that point, and there's nobody willing to, do business with you to trade. At that point, you do pick the best player available. And I think that's where that kind of comes into play. But, if Washington is already ready, let's say we're at the end of the season and they're at the solid number 5 pick, and you do have somebody like Marvin Harrison Jr., and he is there available, and you have a left tackle who is there, and you need to rebuild that offensive line, and then you have to look into the analytics and you say, well, is it a reach to draft that left tackle as opposed to, it's maybe not going to be a reach whatsoever to draft the wide receiver. If it's a reach for the left tackle, maybe you look at either your cards all in for the wide receiver because he's going to be a game changer, possibly, dare I say, generational player. Sometimes you have to, go with what you have to do and draft those guys like that. or you do draft, or I should say, you move down just a couple of steps to go and get that left tackle while picking up other draft picks along the way, and then you're able to fill up even more of your roster. So, folks, I'm saying all this just basically to say that it's going to be a wild ride when it comes to the draft. I don't think it's so cut and dry. I don't think you necessarily always pick because of need, and I don't think you always pick because of best player available, and I don't think you always are going to pick just because you're at that top, 5 choice. Sometimes it's better to trade down to pick up even more draft picks. And hey, there's no problem with that whatsoever. We're talking about the ultimate greater good. We as fans, we have also, talked about not being in love with our current players and being willing to trade them or get rid of them, even guys like Terry McLaurin, if we had to, for the greater good of the team. Well, we have to also look at that in the draft as well. You can't fall in love with some of these big name draftees and thinking this guy's going to be our savior of the team. Why would we not draft him? And meanwhile, on the other end, saying, I'm okay giving up Terry McLaurin. I think it's a little hypocritical in that argument there. That's just me. Anyway, let me know in the comments section what you think about that. A lot of changes are coming up. We're already talking about the draft. We know that it's very likely that at the end of the season, Ron Rivera is no longer going to be the head coach. I'll leave you with this question, though, as it pertains to Ron Rivera. Do you think he is afforded to be able to just step down at the end of the season, or will he be fired? I hope that he's afforded the opportunity and he's allowed to step down gracefully and say, you know what? I think I've left this team in a decent position. I've left this team better than how I found it. I'm willing to let somebody else, take over. And that may be the best thing for him, because maybe that gives him an opportunity to go elsewhere. Who knows? Maybe crazier things may happen. Maybe he winds up going back to Carolina. Carolina's a mess. Anyway, folks, take care. I will see you in the next one.